He didn't just leave Athens impressed. He left sounding like a recruit who had just seen the machine up close and realized why so many people around college football hate recruiting against Georgia. Marcus Fakatou is not some random name getting a spring bump because he posted a few camp clips. This is a 6'7", 295-pound defensive lineman out of Sierra Canyon in California, and the numbers from his last season are the kind that make coaches stop pretending they're calm. In 12 games, he put up 69 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 14 quarterback hurries, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass breakups, and 8 blocked field goals. 8! That part almost sounds fake until you see it repeated across recruiting coverage. According to On3's Notre Dame coverage and College Football HQ, that production is exactly why schools across the country have treated him like a national priority instead of just another West Coast prospect. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for everybody chasing him, because Fakatou is not just big, he's rare big. On3's scouting report describes him as a behemoth with eye-catching movement skills and power, a player around 6'7", with the kind of frame that should carry 300 pounds without losing the burst that makes offensive linemen panic. That matters because Georgia doesn't recruit defensive linemen to look good in photos. Georgia recruits them to ruin an entire side of the line of scrimmage. When a body type like this shows up with real production and real national demand, the whole country notices. The market around him tells the same story. According to the Rivals industry ranking, cited by On3 team coverage and other recruiting reports, Fakatou sits as the number 28 overall prospect in the 2027 class, the number 2 defensive lineman in the country, and the number 3 player in California. The 24/7 Sports composite also has him inside the national top 5 at his position. So this is not some regional battle. This is Georgia walking into a full heavyweight fight with Notre Dame, USC, Michigan, Oregon, Texas, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Miami, all hanging around the picture. That's not recruiting traffic. That's a traffic jam with national title programs leaning on the horn. What changed is that Georgia stopped being a distant logo and became a real feeling. After his trip to Athens, the tone shifted hard. The report that kicked this whole conversation into overdrive came through Rivals, with Chad Simmons getting the quote everybody in the sport noticed. Fakatou said, "Visiting Georgia honestly pushed them to the top of my list." That's not vague praise. That's not recruit speak for thanks for the hospitality. That is a national defensive line target telling the rest of the field that Georgia just landed a clean shot. Yahoo's syndicated report picked it up, and the reaction around Georgia media was immediate because recruits usually do not move that directly in public unless something real happened on campus. And when you read the rest of the feedback, the picture gets even clearer. He talked about the atmosphere in Athens like it had a different pulse. He described everybody as excited, moving with high energy, and he made it sound like Georgia felt alive in a way that hit him the second he got there. That part matters more than fans sometimes admit. Elite recruiting is not only about facilities, NIL chatter, or logo recognition. Once every major school can show money, uniforms, draft picks, and big game footage, the separating factor becomes whether a recruit feels the building, whether the place feels urgent, whether the standard feels real. Georgia has built a program where even one spring visit can make a kid think, yeah, this is different. Dog Post added another layer that Georgia fans should pay attention to. Fakatou had already told the outlet he saw Georgia as a powerhouse, and he specifically pointed to player development and NFL preparation as major factors in what he wants. That is the sentence Rivals should hate most, because if the recruit himself is telling you development is high on the checklist, then Georgia is not walking into this race blind. Georgia is walking in with evidence, real evidence, the kind that does not require a sales pitch to sound convincing. That evidence starts with Trey Scott. Georgia's defensive line coach has become one of the quiet killers on the recruiting trail because his pitch is not abstract anymore. According to his official University of Georgia bio, since arriving in Athens, Scott has coached 8 defensive linemen who were drafted, including 5 first-round picks. The same bio notes that Georgia added another trio of defensive linemen in the 2025 NFL Draft: Michael Williams, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and Warren Brinson. So when Fakatou looks at Georgia and hears "we develop defensive linemen," he doesn't have to imagine what that means. He can count it, he can watch it, he can point to names. The broader Georgia numbers hit even harder. Official Georgia game notes from the 2025 season say Kirby Smart had produced 76 NFL draft picks at Georgia, including 20 first-rounders, and that 13 Bulldogs were selected in the 2025 NFL draft alone. Georgia also stated that 62 Bulldogs had been drafted since 2020, which led all of college football over that span. That is the kind of program profile that turns a visit from "nice trip" into "I need to seriously think about living here." For a defensive lineman especially, Georgia is not selling hope. Georgia is selling a track record with receipts. That's the quiet part of this whole swing in the recruitment. Rivals can promise playing time. Other staffs can talk scheme. Schools closer to home can sell comfort. Georgia walks in with a different weapon: proof that if you are built for violent, high-level defensive football, Athens can turn that into Sundays. And once a recruit like Marcus Fakatou feels that in person, this race stops looking crowded and starts looking tilted. That's why this doesn't feel like one of those loud recruiting wins where everybody celebrates because a coach posted a photo and a fan base starts acting like the commitment is already done. This feels more dangerous than that. It feels quiet. It feels like Georgia got what it wanted most out of the visit: a real shift in the recruit's mind. Fakatou's own words gave that away. After the trip, he said Georgia had been pushed to the top of his list, and that kind of public reaction matters when the schools still fighting for him include Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Miami, and Penn State, as reported by On3 and A to Z Sports. Look at the schools on that list for a second, and you start to understand why Georgia fans should take this seriously. USC can sell home state comfort and Big Ten visibility. Notre Dame sells national reach and a tradition that still carries weight with defensive front recruits. Texas can throw its usual mix of resources, SEC football, and Austin appeal into the pitch. Oregon always finds a way to stay aggressive in these elite battles. Michigan has enough defensive credibility to make any lineman listen. This was never going to be easy, and that's exactly why the Georgia momentum matters. It did not happen in an empty room. It happened in one of the nastier recruiting fights in the country. There's another detail here that makes the whole thing more impressive. Fakatou reclassified into the 2027 class after a huge 2025 season, and that tends to create even more attention because coaches see a younger player already producing at a national level. On3's Notre Dame coverage noted that 18 Power 4 programs visited during the January contact period alone. 18! That tells you what evaluators think of him behind closed doors. They are not recruiting a project, they are recruiting a player they believe can become a difference maker early if he lands in the right room with the right coaching. And if you're Georgia, that last part is where the pitch becomes brutal for everybody else. Because Georgia can sit Fakatou down and show him what has happened to defensive talent in Athens over the last few years without raising its voice. According to the official Georgia athletics site, Trey Scott has coached multiple first-round defensive line picks, and Georgia's 2025 draft class included defensive linemen Michael Williams, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and Warren Brinson. Georgia's official release on the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft also said the program has produced 13 first-round selections over the last 4 seasons. That is a monstrous stat in recruiting terms. For a kid trying to picture the fastest road from high school stardom to NFL relevance, that kind of evidence cuts through every glossy pitch a rival school can make.
It also lines up with what Fakatou appears to want. Dog posts reporting around his visit made it clear that development and NFL preparation stand out to him. That's the line that should make Bulldog fans lean forward. A lot of recruitments get framed around hype, relationships, or geography. Those things matter, sure, but when the player himself keeps circling back to development, Georgia enters the room with a built-in advantage. Kirby Smart's program has become one of the cleanest examples in the country of what happens when elite defensive prospects buy into a system, get developed hard, and then cash in on Sundays. That doesn't mean the race is over. It would be lazy to say that. Recruits this good do not shut things down in March just because one visit hit hard. Oregon still had him scheduled for a March 31st visit, and other major programs were still lined up for spring swings, according to recruiting coverage surfaced across On3 and related reports. So no, Georgia hasn't ended the battle. What Georgia seems to have done is change the shape of it. Instead of being one contender in a crowded pack, the Bulldogs now look like the standard everybody else has to answer. And honestly, that tracks with how Georgia wins these things now. Not always with the noisiest public momentum, not always with a flood of dramatic updates. Sometimes it's one visit, one impression, one honest quote from a recruit who suddenly sounds like he saw the difference for himself. Athens has become one of those places where top defensive prospects arrive with curiosity and leave with the feeling that the whole operation runs a little faster, a little cleaner, a little more seriously than most of the sport. Fakatou basically said as much when he described the energy around the program. That kind of reaction is hard to fake and even harder for rivals to erase. So, if you're Georgia, the takeaway is simple. You got a national top defensive line target on campus. You let the program speak for itself. And now, one of the most coveted linemen in the country is talking like Athens gave him something the others didn't. If you think Georgia seals this one, say it in the comments. If you think Notre Dame, USC, or Texas still has a real shot, drop that too. Hit like, subscribe, and stay locked in, because this recruitment just stopped being polite.